Welcome back, guys. What's going on? Name is Alex Louis. We're back with my course mini series for data binding, which is part of my bigger course, which is the Angular 7 course that I've put up on YouTube. If you remember last time we were here, I talked about the class binding and style binding, and then before that, I also talked about interpolation and property binding. So if you haven't checked those out, please check those out first, and then you can come back here and we can talk about event binding and two-way binding using the ng model. Event binding is what, if you come from a JavaScript world or any type of high-level programming language that you've done any front-end development, is any events that are triggered on an action on the UI. For example, I've taken the trouble to create a HTML page or UI, which I capture a couple of events, and I can definitely go over a couple of these. If you've seen here, I've wrapped my page, well, my component, not my whole page, but the component itself in a div where I capture any time that anybody moves a mouse in this mouse move event. So in Angular, when you want to catch an event, you would put it in parentheses and you'd remove the on. So if you notice, if you do it on JavaScript, it'd be on click, on mouse enter, on mouse move, on blur. In Angular, what they've done is they've stripped that word out, and then you'll wrap your event name in parentheses. Then what goes in here is the actual callback function that you are capturing on that event. So for example, in this particular page, what I've done is I've caught the mouse move event, and I've defined a move function in my component model. I'm passing it back the actual event of that trigger, which is the event itself, and then now I have so for this example, I'd have the mouse event accessible in my function. So let's take a look at that function in my TypeScript file. So if I go to move, let's go to the move function here. You see that I'm passing in the event, which is the mouse move event, and then I'm able to access the x coordinates and the y coordinates. What I've done is I've declared in two properties, an x and a y, for this page, for this component model, as a string. And what I do with that is I'm doing a data bind, a interpolation for xy. So anytime I move the mouse, it will automatically give me the x and y coordinates on the page. Now, the way that this looks, and don't pay attention to the picture first, is you see now that as I move the mouse as part of my whole div, you see how these xy coordinates are flipping up and down. The other event that I've binded is the changing of the URL of an image. So what I've done is I've created a property bind here with the source attribute for the image, and I've passed it in a default image URL. So the image URL would be my array of images that I have, and initially my counter would be 0, right? Because I initialize counter to 0, and then this when it loads up, I would just load the 0th index in my image array. So if you see my image array, it's going to be the flower, and you'll see it here. Now, once I've done that, then I now binded another event for this particular button. Let's take a look at that, which is change picture. And the change picture button, which is over here on line 8, has a click event binded to it, and I created this particular image here. Change image, I'm sorry, function here, which is binded over here. And I put a couple of logic here, and then I set the image to a revolving counter as we go 1, 2, 3, and then if I get to 3, then I reset it back to 0 so that we go back to the flowers. So if we take a look at that, I click on this, I change it, and that. The other event that you see is if I double click on the picture as well, that is an event. So that's pretty cool. So if I go back to my HTML file, I also have a double click event, and I also call that particular function that I've binded in my model. So let's do that. Okay. So I'm going to share this code with you. So don't worry, you'll get this code on the comments below, on the description of the video. And that's all in a nutshell. I mean, you can capture events that you could capture in JavaScript. Any event that you could capture in JavaScript, you would want to do it in the Angular event binding, so that you can code it in Angular, and you would just put your function name and define your function as to what actually you want to do with that event and take any action to it. And then if you see, I have it on focus and then on blur, the input, and if I type stuff in, I also have the on key up, on key down event happening. The next binding that I want to show you is the two-way binding, and that will be on the next video. So I hope that you have learned a little bit about event binding, which is, I think it's pretty important when you're building your application, because you're definitely going to want to be able to be interactive with the user, and you can always use these events in your page. Hope you enjoyed the video. Check me out on parttimeadjunct.com, and also don't forget to like the video if you did like the video. If you didn't like the video, you can just post your comments. Keep it PG-13, because my daughter's learning how to read and she does read my comments, so try and keep it PG-13. Take care, and I'll see you on the last video, which is the two-way binding video on Angular. Thanks.